He thought he was just a traveler, lost on a lonely alien world. But that night, under the strange twin moons, he met something he never expected. A small alien cub stumbled from the shadows, weak, starving, and trembling with fear. Its bright eyes begged for help, yet its kind were known to be dangerous. The human looked at his last piece of food, then at the cub. Against all logic, he shared it. The cub devoured it quickly, then paused, staring at him with eyes far too knowing for a child. Without a sound, it vanished into the dark forest. He thought the moment was over. But what returned a few hours later was not just the cub. It was the cub's mother. A towering tigress-like alien woman, beautiful and terrifying, her glowing eyes fixed only on him. And in that instant, he realized, his simple act of kindness had changed everything. The night was quiet on the strange planet. 2 moons hung in the sky, silver and pale, casting soft light on the empty ground. A human traveler sat near a small campfire. He was tired from walking all day, his bag nearly empty, his food almost gone. He stared at the flames, wondering how long he could keep moving before he ran out of everything. Then, he heard something. A soft sound, almost like a cry. He turned his head and listened again. It came from the edge of the forest, where the shadows were thick and deep. At first, he thought it might be the wind or some creature passing by. But then the sound came again, this time clearer. It was weak, trembling, and full of hunger. Out of the shadows stepped a small figure. The human froze, his eyes narrowing. It was a cub. Not an animal he knew, but a small alien cub. Its fur was short, its body thin, and its bright eyes glowed faintly under the moonlight. The cub stumbled forward, almost falling with each step, as if it had no strength left. The human's heart tightened. He had heard stories of these creatures before. They were not like pets or wild animals. They were said to be the children of a powerful race, a race no human wanted to anger. To touch one of their young was dangerous. To even look too closely could invite trouble. But this cub was not dangerous. Not now. It was starving. Its small frame shook with weakness. Its glowing eyes were filled not with anger, but with pleading. The human looked down at his bag. Inside was one piece of food left, a small ration, meant to keep him alive. He hesitated. If he gave it away, he would be left with nothing for himself. On this lonely world, that choice could mean his own hunger tomorrow. But he looked at the cub again, and something inside him refused to ignore it. Slowly, he opened his bag and pulled out the ration. The cub's nose twitched, its body trembling even more as the smell reached it. The human held the food out. For a moment, the cub didn't move. Its glowing eyes watched him carefully, almost as if it was trying to understand why a stranger would do this. Then, with a small step, the cub came closer. It sniffed the food, then gently took it from his hand. And then it ate. The cub devoured the food as if it had not eaten for days. The human watched in silence, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. When the last piece was gone, the cub licked its small paws and then looked up at him. For just a second, the human thought the cub's eyes carried more meaning than simple thanks. It was as if the cub understood. A soft wind passed through the trees, and the cub stepped back. Its glowing eyes stayed on the human for a moment longer, as though remembering his face. Then, without a sound, it turned and ran into the forest. The shadows swallowed it quickly, leaving the man alone once again. The human sat back, staring at the empty spot where the cub had been. He had no food left now, only the quiet company of the fire. But strangely, he felt lighter, not heavier. He whispered to himself. It was hungry. That's all that mattered. Yet deep inside, he couldn't forget the way the cub had looked at him before leaving. It hadn't been just the look of a creature fed. It was something else. Something he couldn't name. The night grew colder, and the fire burned lower. The human wrapped his arms around himself, listening to the forest sounds. Every rustle made him think of the cub. Would it survive? Would it even remember him tomorrow? But as the fire cracked softly, another thought troubled him more. What if someone, or something, remembered his kindness in a way he could not predict? He had heard whispers in spaceports, stories of how one small action could change an entire fate. He shook his head, trying to push the thought away. It was only a cub, nothing more. He had given food because it was the right thing to do. Nothing strange would come from that, he told himself. Still, as the moons moved higher in the sky, he could not stop glancing at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, the cub had vanished, but the memory of its glowing eyes stayed with him. They had not looked like the eyes of a helpless child. They had looked deeper, older, almost as if the cub carried a secret. The human lay down near the fire, closing his eyes at last. He wanted to sleep, but unease lingered in his chest. He told himself tomorrow would be the same as today. He would wake, he would walk, and he would search for another path across this alien world. But part of him knew tomorrow would not be the same. Not after what happened tonight. Something had begun, and he could feel it. He just didn't know what. Far away in the forest, the cub moved quickly through the trees, its small steps guided by instinct. It had eaten, it had survived, but it carried more than just food in its memory. It carried the image of a human who had given without asking, a human who had shown kindness when others would have turned away. And the cub was not going to forget. The fire was almost gone when the sound came again. It was not the soft cry of a hungry cub this time. It was heavier, deeper, a presence moving through the forest. The human sat up quickly, his eyes searching the darkness. The night was still, but something was drawing closer. For a moment he thought it might be the cub again, returning for more food. His heart softened at the thought, but then he saw a shape moving between the trees. It was taller, slower, and carried a weight that was not childlike at all. His hand tightened on his pack as the figure stepped into the moonlight. The cub was there, yes, but it was not alone. Behind it walked a towering figure with sleek fur that shimmered faintly in the pale light. Her steps were graceful, yet powerful, each one echoing like a silent command. Her eyes, golden and sharp, locked onto the human instantly. The human froze. He didn't need anyone to tell him who she was. This was the mother. The air itself seemed to hold its breath around her, as though the night was afraid to move without her permission. The cub ran to her side, tugging gently at her hand before pointing toward the human. She tilted her head, her gaze never leaving him. There was no roar, no sudden rush, only silence so heavy that he felt every beat of his heart in his chest. She walked closer, slow and steady, her eyes narrowing slightly. She was unlike anything he had ever seen before. There was strength in her form, beauty in her movements, and something untamed that could not be described in simple words. The cub hid behind her legs but peeked out from time to time, as though urging her to trust. The human swallowed. He had expected anger, maybe suspicion, but she did not speak right away. She simply stood in front of him, her gaze steady, studying every detail of his face, his posture, even the small fire that separated them. When she finally spoke, her voice was smooth, almost calm, yet carried a weight that pressed on him. "Why did you feed my child?" The human searched for an answer, but the truth was simple. "Because it was hungry," he said quietly. Her eyes narrowed further, as though she was testing the honesty in his words. The cub tugged at her hand again, and this time she looked down at it. The child's small glowing eyes were filled with something she had not seen before, trust. She turned back to the human, circling slowly, her movements quiet and graceful like a predator in thought. "Humans do not give without reason," she said softly. "Your kind takes, demands, and fears. Yet you gave." The human sat still, not knowing what to say. He could feel her presence pressing against him like the weight of the forest itself. Still, he kept his calm. "Sometimes," he answered. "You give because it is the right thing." The cub gave a small sound, almost like a laugh, and pressed closer to its mother. She paused, eyes still on the human, as though she was trying to see something deeper inside him. The silence stretched, long and uneasy, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire. Finally, she lowered herself to sit across from him, her posture tall and composed. The cub immediately settled beside her, still watching the human closely. "You risk much," she said, her voice softer now. "Feeding my child binds you to something you may not understand." The human frowned slightly, unsure of her meaning. "I didn't expect anything in return," he said. Her eyes softened for the briefest moment, but then hardened again. "That is why it matters." The cub reached forward then, placing its small hand near the fire's warmth. Its glowing eyes looked between the human and its mother, as though waiting for something to change. The human felt a strange pull in his chest, a bond forming that he had not chosen but could not ignore. The night grew deeper, and the stars above seemed brighter, as if they too were watching. The human realized this was no simple meeting. His act of kindness had drawn him into something far larger, something that involved not only a cub, but its mother, and perhaps an entire world. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but one truth was clear. The cub had not returned to him by chance. And the mother, this powerful, mysterious figure, had not come simply to take her child away. She had come because of him. And in that moment, sitting by the fire under the watch of her golden eyes, the human understood that his journey had just taken a turn he could never have imagined. The fire burned low, sending small sparks into the night sky. The human sat quietly, watching the tall alien mother across from him. Her golden eyes never wavered, never blinked for too long, as if every second she was measuring his soul. The cub leaned against her side, its small eyes glowing faintly, still looking at him with quiet trust. Finally, the mother spoke again, her voice calm but edged with something sharp. "My child says you did not hesitate, that you gave food without fear. Do you know what that means?" The human shook his head slowly. "I only saw a hungry child. Nothing more." Her lips curved slightly, but it was not quite a smile. More like a secret she kept to herself. She rose to her feet, moving with a grace that felt both natural and deliberate. Her steps circled him again, slow, steady, as though she was testing him not with claws or strength, but with silence and presence. The human felt her shadow fall across him each time she passed behind. He sat still, choosing not to show discomfort. He could feel the cub's small gaze on him as well, almost as if it was waiting for him to fail. "You are different from others of your kind," she said finally, stopping behind him. "Most would have turned away. Some might have tried to harm a child they did not understand. But you—" she paused, her voice softening just slightly. "You gave." The human did not answer right away. His thoughts were simple. He had acted on instinct, not to be remembered or judged. At last, he replied quietly, "Because no one should be left hungry. Not even your child." For a moment, the only sound was the fire. Then the cub made a soft noise, almost like approval, and pressed its small head against her side. The mother lowered her gaze to it, her expression unreadable. When she looked back at him, her eyes had shifted. They still carried sharpness, but now there was also curiosity. "Do you know who my child is?" she asked. The human blinked, unsure of her meaning. "I know only that it was starving," he said. A silence stretched between them again. She knelt by the fire, her golden eyes catching its light, and for the first time, she seemed less distant. "Among my people, children are more than young lives. They carry our line, our legacy, our future. My child is important." The human's chest tightened. He realized now that his simple act might not remain simple. This was no ordinary cub. He wondered if his choice had drawn him into something larger than he was ready for. The mother's gaze did not leave him. "Do you regret it? Giving your food?" He shook his head at once. "No." Something flickered in her eyes. Not surprise, not anger, but something else. Perhaps respect. Perhaps confusion. The cub suddenly stepped forward, small hands clasping together, and looked up at the human. Its glowing eyes met his, and in that silent gaze, he felt something stir. The bond was real, though he did not choose it. The mother watched the moment carefully, her sharp gaze softening at the edges. Then she sat back, folding her arms with a strange calm. Perhaps, she said slowly, your path is not what you thought. Perhaps it has already changed. The human did not reply. He could feel the truth in her words, even though he did not yet understand them. His journey had been lonely, his choices simple. But tonight, by a fire under twin moons, with a cub at his side and its mother before him, he sensed that he was no longer just passing through this world. The cub climbed back to her side, but its glowing eyes lingered on him as though it wanted to stay closer. The mother noticed, but said nothing. She only kept watching him, studying his every movement, as if searching for the answer to a question she had not spoken aloud. The night deepened, the forest whispering quietly around them, but the human did not feel alone anymore. He felt watched, tested, and somehow chosen. And though he did not yet know why, he felt sure of one thing. This meeting was not the end. It was only the beginning. The forest was quiet, yet the air around the campfire felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. The human sat on one side, the alien mother and her cub on the other. The fire glowed faintly between them, throwing long shadows that danced against the trees. Every crackle of burning wood seemed louder than it should have, as though even the night was listening. The cub leaned against its mother's arm, but its gaze stayed fixed on the human. It blinked slowly, the faint glow of its eyes shining with a strange warmth, as if it trusted him more than it should. The mother noticed, and though her expression stayed calm, something subtle shifted in her face. At last, she broke the silence. "Your kind is spoken of in many ways," she said. Her voice was steady, smooth, but carried weight. "Some call humans weak. Others say you are greedy. My people see you as loud creatures, always reaching for what is not yours. Yet tonight," she paused, her golden eyes narrowing slightly, "you did something I did not expect." The human kept his gaze on the fire. He had heard such words before, not from her kind but from others across the stars. "Maybe those things are true," he said softly. "But I am only one man. And your child was hungry." Her eyes lingered on him, searching his face as if she wanted to believe but could not. She drew the cub closer, wrapping her arm gently around it, then leaned back with slow grace. "You gave more than food," she whispered. "You gave a bond. And my child does not forget such things." The human turned his eyes toward the cub, and for a moment, he felt something stir inside. A quiet connection, wordless yet powerful, as though the act of sharing had tied them together. The cub smiled faintly, curling its small hands in its lap, and nestled against its mother once more. The mother followed his gaze, and a strange softness flickered in her golden eyes. But she quickly masked it, straightening her posture, returning to her commanding presence. "Do not mistake this moment," she warned gently. "Kindness has a cost. You may not see it yet, but it will follow you." The human stayed quiet. He did not regret his choice, but her words weighed heavily on him. He wondered what cost she spoke of, and why her tone carried not only warning, but something that sounded almost like care. Time passed slowly. The fire dimmed, the forest whispered, and still they remained in silence. At last, the cub crawled closer, its small steps careful, until it sat just a breath away from the human. Its glowing eyes met his, full of quiet trust, as if it had chosen him. The mother watched, her body tense but unmoving. She did not stop the child. Instead, she let it sit near him, her gaze sharper than the firelight itself. "My child does not choose lightly," she said at last. "If it trusts you, then I must wonder why." The human met her eyes across the fire. He had no answer that could explain it. He only said, "Maybe it sees what you cannot." Her golden eyes narrowed, but not in anger. There was something else there, thought, curiosity, perhaps even doubt. She tilted her head, studying him again. "You speak simply, yet your words carry more than they show. That is dangerous." The cub reached forward, placing its small hand near his own. It did not touch, but the space between them felt charged, as if an invisible thread connected them. The human glanced at the mother, half expecting her to pull the child away, but she remained still. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice lower, almost like a secret shared with the night. Among my people, trust is rare. To earn it from one of us is not given, it is taken by fate. Perhaps fate has already chosen you. The words hung in the air, filling the silence with a strange weight. The human did not know what to say. He only knew that something was changing, something larger than himself, larger than the simple act of giving food. The cub rested against him at last, its small body warm, its breath soft as it began to drift toward sleep. The mother's eyes softened, just a little, as she watched the scene. She sighed quietly, and for the first time, her voice carried no warning, only honesty. Maybe I was wrong about your kind. The fire flickered lower, the stars above stretched endless across the sky, and the human realized this night was no longer ordinary. The bond had grown, silent but strong, tying him to them in ways he could not yet see. He closed his eyes briefly, listening to the forest and the steady breathing of the cub beside him. The mother's presence was still powerful, still cautious, but now there was something else in it, a question, unspoken, waiting for tomorrow. And in that quiet moment, he understood. His journey would not continue alone anymore. The boy woke earlier than usual, his eyes opening to the faint glow of morning light that spilled gently into the small shelter. The alien cub was still curled against his side, breathing softly, as if it had finally found a safe place to rest. For a long moment, he simply watched it sleep, its tiny chest rising and falling, its features calm and innocent. He felt something stir inside him, something that told him their bond was growing stronger with each passing day. But he also knew the world outside was not as kind as this quiet moment. When the cub woke, its eyes blinked open with a faint shine, and it reached for him instantly, as if afraid he would disappear. He offered a smile, brushing his hand gently over its small head. The cub made a soft sound, neither word nor cry, but something in between, a sound that spoke of trust. That trust weighed on him. He had promised himself he would keep the little creature safe, yet he had no clear plan for how to do it. Food was always the first concern. The boy had to step outside, scanning the strange landscape with cautious eyes. The forest shimmered with colors unknown to Earth, trees that pulsed faint light through their bark, flowers that seemed to hum faintly when touched by the wind. But beneath the beauty, he sensed danger. He could not let himself be distracted. Every step he took, he thought of the cub waiting for him back in the shelter. He found fruit-like pods hanging from twisted branches. He had tested them before, carefully sharing small bites with the cub to make sure they were safe. Today, the cub joined him, padding slowly behind on shaky legs. Its strength was returning, though its movements were still clumsy. When it stumbled, the boy quickly caught it, holding it steady until it regained balance. The cub looked up at him with wide eyes, and in that gaze, the boy felt something deep, like a bond not just of survival, but of family. They ate together, sharing the strange fruit, the cub nibbling while keeping close to him. Yet as they rested, the boy noticed something in the distance. Shapes moved through the misty trees, shadows that did not belong to the forest itself. His heart tightened. Whoever they were, they did not walk like animals. They moved with purpose, too controlled, too aware. He quickly signaled to the cub, lifting it into his arms. The cub gave a soft sound, sensing the unease, and clung tightly to him. He carried it back to the shelter, but even there, he felt the safety slipping away. The cub seemed restless too, its ears twitching, its small body pressed against his chest as if it understood. He whispered to it softly, promising protection, though his own mind was racing. If they were being watched, what did it mean? Who were those figures? And most of all, were they searching for the cub? As night began to fall, he kept a small fire alive for warmth, though he shielded the light as much as possible. The cub dozed against him again, but this time its sleep was uneasy, its little claws clutching his sleeve even in dreams. The boy's thoughts ran endlessly, about the strange world, about the cub, and about his own role in this unfolding journey. He wasn't sure how, but he knew their lives were now tied together. In the distance, faint sounds echoed through the trees. Not the cry of animals, not the rustle of leaves. Something else. The boy held the cub close, his mind whispering one thought over and over: we are not alone anymore. The hall was filled with a strange quietness, the kind that carried unspoken words and heavy thoughts. The alien queen stood near the balcony, her eyes lost in the distant glow of her world. Beside her, the human felt both small and important, like a traveler who had wandered too far and yet was meant to be here. The queen did not speak at first, but her silence was full of meaning, and the human could almost hear the weight of her heart. When she finally turned to him, there was no crown on her head, no guard by her side, only a woman with secrets, fears, and a trust she rarely gave. Her words were soft, almost uncertain, as if she had never shared them with anyone before. She told him of her people's hidden pain, of the choices that bound her, and of the doubts that followed her even in victory. Each word felt like a door opening, showing him parts of her world no one else was allowed to see. The human listened carefully, not interrupting, not judging, just being there in the moment. And that was what surprised her most. She was used to demands, to deals, to schemes wrapped in sweet promises. But here was someone who asked for nothing, who gave his presence without condition. It unsettled her in a way she could not explain, making her question walls she had built around her heart long before. As the night deepened, the stars above seemed closer, as though they leaned in to witness this quiet exchange. The queen's voice grew softer, her steps closer, until their shadows nearly touched. She asked questions not of war or power, but of small things, of human skies, of laughter, of the warmth of a home. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel curious, almost free. The human's answers carried no grand promises, but they carried honesty, and that honesty reached places within her that even her own kind had never touched. There was a stillness in her eyes now, the kind that came before a decision, one that could change everything. She looked at him as if trying to see the truth of his soul, and in that moment, the distance between a queen and a stranger disappeared. It was no longer about duty or fear, but about something far deeper, something both fragile and unshakable.